So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, September the 13th, and this is Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers, episode number 275. I'm Frederick Dunn, and this is the way to be. So I'm really glad that you're here. And if you want to know what we're going to talk about in today's Q&A, please look down in the video description, and all the topics will be listed in order. How do you submit a question of your own for future consideration? You go to the website, thewaytobe.org, click on the page marked The Way to Be, fill out the form, and then maybe your topic will show up on one of these Friday Q&As. There's a lot going on outside. Weather is pretty darn good today. I know you're wondering. It's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 27 Celsius. That's 50% relative humidity. That's good for the bees because we're in the middle of a nectar flow. This is our last big nectar flow here in the northeastern United States, state of Pennsylvania. So the things that are going on here may be different than what's going on where you are. So I invite you to go outside, stare at your bees, look at the environment, see what's going on, see what your bees are doing. 2.9 mile per hour winds, 0 chance of rain, and that's 4.6 kilometers per hour. And no rain for today, light chance of rain over the weekend. So we have a pretty decent weekend too. That sounds pretty good to me. And the supervisor is not here. He's back in school. So he is in elementary school. He is very satisfied with his fellow classmates, and he even approves of his teacher right now. So things are good for the third grade. Now, what are the bees on outside? Let's talk about that. Goldenrod, for starters. Goldenrod is everywhere. Some people don't like goldenrod honey. The bees are spending a lot of time on the goldenrod plants, and it looks like they're getting a lot of nectar, and they're loaded with pollen. Go to your beehives, look at the landing boards, and count the pollen loads coming in between 11 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. If you got more than 10 per minute, you're set. They are building. They're doing great. Borage is great. Borage is everywhere. I have started to prepare some of the plots that I want to use for fall seeding this year. I usually wait until spring to seed. So this year, though, I'm going to try doing it in the fall and let those seeds stratify on their own and see if they'll just kick off on their own in spring. Who knows? If you've got the land and a chance to play around, why not do it? Borage is one of those that I'm going to seed this fall. What am I doing for preps? Somebody wrote and asked me that, and I dodged it because I'm really not a gardener, not much of a gardener, and I always recommend that you go to your local gardening experts. Most beekeeping clubs have master gardeners in their membership. We do. So it's great to have these people available, and they're the ones that really should be giving the advice about soil type and how to prep it and how to put your seeds out, when to do it, and all this other stuff, because I'm just a willy-nilly, very casual gardener, and I tend to just throw seeds around. Happens to work, so there you go. But I do it in spring. This year I'm doing it in the fall. Borage is fantastic. I just want to plant a whole bunch more of it. Cosmos, going strong. They are a nectar source. They are a source of pollen. The bees are on them, and there's a lot of bee density on those blossoms, which tells me that they replace and restore their nectar very quick because the same blossoms get visited in pretty quick sequences there. Sunflowers are still around, although the squirrels are climbing them, breaking them down, and stealing the seeds before the seeds are even ready. It's very annoying. We have red squirrels here, gray squirrels, and fox squirrels. So they're all after the seeds ahead of time, but we still have sunflowers. I thought they were pretty much wrapped up last week, but they're still going. There's another variety of sunflower that does very well, and I highly recommend it for borders of your property. If you want some kind of late season privacy screen that also has floral content, Maximilian sunflowers. I have the really tall ones. They're like 7 or 8 feet tall by now, and this is year after year. They're perennial, so you don't plant them every year. They come up on their own. They get nice and tall, and so I've been bordering my lower field, which is to the west, with Maximilian sunflowers. They're doing great, and the good news about them is they go right until frost. So do the cosmos. So these things have a very long bloom time. We have ragweed. Ragweed is something a lot of people really despise, particularly if they have ragweed allergies and things like that, but the bees are collecting pollen from those. So I don't like ragweed very much, so I'm trying to beat that down a little. And also when we're driving down the road, we see acres and acres of goldenrod So I think I should be replacing goldenrod on my property with something else, even though right now it looks fantastic. So if you're taking pictures, but if you're going to plant something, check in with the Xerxes Society and some of these pollinator resources that might have some great ideas for natives that you can plant. So, fall seed site preps. Hyssop, still going strong. You can't go wrong with hyssop. Blue giant hyssop does fantastic. Anise hyssop does fantastic. Agastaki, all of it is just great. And it's so nice to walk up and just grab a handful of it and smell it. Good stuff. So that's all going on. Bees are all over it. And native pollinators too. Don't forget your native pollinators just because they're backyard beekeepers. Also, a little side note before we get going. This is a great opportunity to promote things to your neighbors. I don't really think we should tell everybody to become a beekeeper. I think that we should be promoting pollinator gardens and pollinator plots and get people to turn their green spaces into pollinator friendly spaces. And then you know what they'll be doing? Feeding your bees. So, what else can we talk about? If you have a question that's just burning you up right now and you have to get an answer, please Google the Way to Bee Fellowship and you'll go to Facebook. Some people don't use Facebook. If you don't, you can't join the fellowship. It's a good group of people, more than 8,000 members, and they're super friendly, and they have answers for every person in every part of the world. So, it's all good stuff. I guess we'll get right into it now with question number 1, which comes from, oh man, I can't pronounce the name, DajurynI TAC8. So that's the YouTube name. Hello, I have 2 hives. One has been doing great all year. The other has 2 deeps, but they have only used the bottom deep. They never went up to the upper deep. I tried changing out comb, but no positive results. They have been like this since they came out of winter. Now, if they make it through winter, great. Unlikely any info on what I did wrong. Would replace the queen nearly and maybe early, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so here's an area where we just share what we would do. Me personally, what if I had a hive like this at this time of year, by the way? Part of the problem with the question is, and that's why I want you to know, if you're submitting a question or a topic, let me know where you are, what the climate is. It may be profoundly different than what we're dealing with here. So let's assign it to right here. I find a colony that I've known all year just plodded along. Their brood got a decent size. Maybe we're talking 3 or 4 frames, and some bees do that. 3 or 4 frames of brood, the rest is pollen and nectar and honey, and then they just plod along and it never gets any bigger than that, which means what? You can't put a super on it. You're not going to get any honey from that. Now here's the thing. While I'm talking, see? Sometimes if you put too much space, I don't know why bees do this, but this is a double deep situation. So if you give them too much space too soon, the bees kind of back off on using the space. I don't know why they do that. It seems like they would just go, wow, lots of space, and they would expand into it, bring in lots of stores, and just keep growing. But if they don't, and you leave the space open and they just don't add any, they won't draw a comb, they won't fill it with resources, so you've got a second box with nothing in it, and they all stayed in the first box. First of all, in my neck of the woods, particularly the southern parts of the state of Pennsylvania, there are a bunch of beekeepers, commercial level keepers, that stick with 1 deep brood box systems. So what that means is they set up a single deep brood box, 10 frame usually, sometimes 8. They put a queen excluder on top. Everything above that is a medium box, and they expand box by box as the bees consistently expand their honey stores up there. Steve Rapasky comes to mind. He is one of the people that has really kind of drilled that in, that you can do a single deep. So, but what would I do if I had a colony that just failed to expand? They didn't store anything, they didn't do anything extra. Well, so if I were advising you brand new before this all happened, because somebody listening may have this idea, just add medium supers above the deep. Don't go double deeps. They tend to backfire. Backfired on me this year with more than 1 hive. Because I did double deeps just to see what would happen, I was using the Premier specially treated boxes that are to encourage propolis spreading on the interior surface of it. They have that roughed up surface on the inside, and so I've been looking at those ever since I got them after the North American Honeybee Expo back in January. We implemented those boxes, and so they only come in deeps, so they didn't have any mediums, so I did double deeps on some just so I could see how it works. Well, they filled the 2 boxes and didn't do anything else. So the good news is it's double deeps. The bad news is they didn't expand beyond that. So something happens to the bees if we give them too much space too soon. Now, as the colonies grow, if you end up with one of the super colonies with lots of frames of brood, and now we're at 6 or 7 frames of brood, which, by the way, happens a lot with my horizontal hives. When they do that, they expand easily. But if you expand it too soon, I guess you get the picture. For some reason, they balk at that. The colonies that build faster and better are the narrower, more vertical columns. So 6-frame, 7-frame apimays, the 5-frame nucleus hives, the 6-frame polystyrene hives. So there are several companies out there that make these intermediate sizes. Now, what's good about that is, well, there's several things that are good about it. One, that they fill the spaces quicker. They tend to use that better. And easier for you to lift. So I don't know if you've walked up and grabbed even a medium super that's wall-to-wall honey. That's hefty. And if you're not ready for that, if you're not physically capable of lifting that, now what you're down to is removing the frames in the bee yard and transferring frame by frame into another box so you can take it away back to wherever you're going to uncap and spin out your honey. So the good news is you would be leaving that medium right on, and hopefully you've got drawn comb to replace it with while you're out there. That's a perfect world. But otherwise, the lifting, it's heavy, so 5 frames deep, even like the Keeper's hive, which, by the way, is going gangbusters right now. It has nothing but nucleus hives going up, and it's built off a base that's the size of a 10-frame, but they only have 8 frames in it because it's constructed so that it will support these nucleus size hives going up. So that's something else that's coming up that we're paying attention to. But what would I do with this one? I would remove the queen. Now, would I remove the queen and let them replace a queen halfway through September? No, because that really doesn't give them enough time. I would remove the queen and then I would combine them with another colony of bees. Now, the problem with that is now we have all these boxes, right? So combining it just makes a big mess, but that's what I personally would do, is combine the population of that hive with another hive that's going strong or maybe needs a little help but is bigger and better off than this current hive. Now here's the problem, and this is also why I'm explaining it to you. Some beekeepers use only medium size boxes, the whole thing, all of them. Every box, all the brood boxes, all the supers, everything, all mediums. And the reason they do that is because then every frame is a medium, every box is compatible, whether it's brood or honey super makes no difference. Also, they can rotate their boxes, which is something I don't practice. But if you're doing that, here's an example, here's a case where it would be so much easier if all their hives had all the same equipment, because then they can interchange these boxes and the frames equally. Because I run into this myself. Sometimes if I want to combine 2 colonies together, but they both have deep brood boxes and they're all down in the brood boxes, now I'm in a pickle because I can't just combine them all unless I luck out and maybe 6 of the 10 frames in one of the hives does not have frames that are working, that are involved in resource production. Resources we can pull away and we can just take the bees. It's the brood that becomes the complicating issue because we have to accommodate all of our brood in the new box. See the mess we have? So fix number 3. So combine them, get rid of the queen, put them together so that they merge. Here's the other thing. Let's say we want to keep it just like that, but we want to try to repair things. If we let them make their own queen, we're 15 days out, more than that, before you see a mature queen coming out. And then she has to sexually mature, and then she has to fly out, she has to mate, and look where we are. We're in October already. So there isn't time to do that here. So the next is get rid of the existing queen, bring in a new queen, and install her, a laying queen from a reputable queen breeder. And then you've put her in, you can take them out in very close proximity. In other words, remove your current queen today, let's say, and then on Sunday, install the replacement. And they will be more than happy to accept that replacement. Although you don't do a direct release, you still want to assess your bees, make sure they're accepting her, trying to feed her, welcoming the new queen. And here's the good news about that. There's only a couple of days of egg production interruption when you do that. So we brought in a laying queen. She goes to work right away. And most of those, when you buy them, they're laying within a day or two. And so now we have eggs and we've got a fully stocked hive that is ready. Now, this time of year, we're not expanding that much. But you would see an improvement over the queen that you removed, which just stayed neutral all year long. So if you really want to beef that up, go ahead. The other thing is you could just feed them, try to get them through winter, wait until spring, and then replace your queen then. When there's lots of drones, everybody wintered, everything's great, you have this small colony. Small colonies can surprise us when it comes to winter time. As long as your cover is insulated, as long as you have a single entrance down below, and if you needed to bolster their resources, I would get rid of that second deep, by the way. I would put them all into one box. You have 2 deeps, the second one's not very involved. Take your best frames with the best resources in them, pack them all down to one, and then get rid of the other deep. If you need more space, replace it with a medium, and now back feed them. There's time to do that. So I realize I'm kind of all over the chart on this. But if you bring in a new queen, you're going to start fresh, and then she can produce new stock for you going into winter. But all the resources are there. They're established. Your foragers know what they're doing. You're good to go. Let us know what you decide to do, and then whether or not it was good or not, how things worked out. Let's go on to question number 2. Now that I completely muddied the waters on what to do going into winter with a double deep box that never got past the bottom box. So super annoying there, I know, from Beekeeping Management. Number 2, this is Mike from Lower Hudson Valley, New York. I have a 5-gallon bucket of honey that I harvested this season. I want to check the moisture content. Does it make a difference where I pull the sample of honey from in the bucket? Should I pull the sample from the top? Should I pull the honey gate at the bottom? Just wondering if the moisture content differs depending on where it is in the bucket, and the answer is it can differ. So here's the thing. Sometimes when you put your honey in the bucket, and most of you have heard me recommend get it out of that bucket as quick as possible so that if it ever crystallizes or something, you can deal with smaller amounts and so on. But if there's any stratification inside the bucket, and sometimes you see it, you'll see crystallization happening along the edges, sometimes along the bottom, and it creeps through the rest of it. Or sometimes it'll just leave part of it uncrystallized. It's pretty interesting. The other thing is sometimes in storage, these buckets, you can see a very white, thin foam of bubbles on top. And some people wonder what that's about. Well, if you've left it out in a storage shed, or if you're in a honey room, which most backyard beekeepers have sheds or garages or barns or something like that, they have outside temperature. So in the morning, what happens? The air around it warms up. You've got this bucket of honey that's acclimated to the nighttime temperature. And then what happens at the top of the honey? Condensation happens, and then this white foam shows up. So then what that is the honey trying to protect itself, because condensation means water. Water is going to try to make its way into the honey, right? And so the honey defends itself, and it's hygroscopic, so it would eventually homogenize in theory. And so what happens is we want to take our samples from the top couple of inches of your bucket of honey. And here's why. If there's going to be a higher water content, it's going to be up there. Because the little white foamy stuff, by the way, is hydrogen peroxide. Honey defends itself with that antibacterial hydrogen peroxide. It makes it on its own. It's not always there. It's a response to contact with water. Sometimes you can see it even in dead out beehives that have honey that's exposed. You'll see hydrogen peroxide on the surface of that too. Cuts down on bacteria. So anyway, pull the sample from the top just to be safe, because if there is drier honey, it's going to be down at the bottom. So if you have 19% or something like that or higher at the top of that, you want to dry that down right away. This is also why some people pour out their honey and get big surface area when they blow fans on it to dry things down. I don't personally do that. Because if you set buckets or jars or things like that, this is right after you've harvested, which, by the way, is another reason why you want to get your stuff in your jars right away, so you can test the water content of the honey. And I just blow fans on it, and I use a dehumidifier, and I put it in a tent. So grow tent is what I use, and it drops at about 1% of water every 24 hours, which isn't too bad. And that means that, remember, the moisture content is concentrated at the top. So by blowing fans at the top, I really don't need to bring up what's at the bottom, because it will homogenize. It will equalize the water content throughout the honey eventually. And you can stir it up, of course, which I don't recommend you do, but if you want to know the highest water content, test it from the top. If it already starts to smell off, you can have trouble. So this is why I want people to process and manage their honey right away. So anyway, just wondering if the moisture content differs where it is in the bucket. So yeah, it can. Question number 2A, I'm calling this one because it's a relevant aspect of this, and it comes from Michelle Armstrong, 4060, which is a YouTube channel name. After melting the crystals, how long will the honey stay liquid? But it depends on the floral source, but do you know a range of times? So this is something that I talked to my wife about, because what did I say was coming in? Oh, I totally forgot the asters. Those have kicked in. Asters are kind of a marker for really heavy nectar flow, along with everything else that's going on. So, and the reason I brought that up is because my wife doesn't like aster honey because it crystallizes so fast. She's had honey crystallize in the jars within 2 weeks of bottling, right? So, because this is probably a popular thing that people are talking about right now, I looked into some stuff just to verify my facts on this, because I realize that some of you may be taking this for action. So, to reduce crystallization, but here's the thing, it does depend heavily on the floral content, and this is where things can get kind of complicated. We know that the bees are collecting sucrose from different plants, from different sources, right? They're also getting particulates all over themselves, and it gets into the honey too. And the particulates that we're talking about would be pollen. So they get a lot of pollen in their honey, and that's one of the ways that we validate raw honey, by the way. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard this discussion that, snowflakes have a little speck of dirt in the middle of each of them, that kind of thing, because snow on its way down, it has to collide and connect with something, so the crystals form out from that. And that's 90% of the time true. It can still get so cold that things just automatically start freezing, but particulates are what these crystals form on, and out they go. So the particulates in your honey, much the same. So if you were trying to keep your honey from crystallizing, you can really filter it down if you wanted to. I don't personally like to do that. The finest filter that I use is a 200 micron filter. Now, if you go much finer than that, for example, if you go to the Pierce manufacturing and you get their uncapping tank, they also give you this big net that goes around underneath the uncapping tank to catch the big debris. That's a 600 micron filter, so the opening is 600 microns. So little bits and pieces do get through. Now, if you wanted to go finer than a 200 micron filter, you have to heat the honey to get it through it, because otherwise you'll pour it in that filter and it'll just sit there and not go anywhere. So by filtering out more of the particulates, is what I'm getting at, is you cut down on crystallization. But you would also be potentially filtering out the goodness of the honey, which some people really want and need to see, which is bits of pollen and stuff in there. So I think even some of the cheaters, some of the, I won't name the countries, but some of the countries that are shipping us funny honey actually seed the honey later with pollen. And the funny part is, some of the pollen comes from sources that would not produce nectar and therefore would not be used in honey production. So really interesting what people try to do. But the particulates would cause crystallization. The other thing is they collect sucrose, there's glucose and fructose. Bees have invertase. It's an enzyme that helps them break it down. So there are some plants that break down more readily into sucrose and glucose. And here's the thing. The sucrose and glucose percentages, so the more fructose that you have once it's inverted, and invert sugar, that's what they're talking about. High fructose, less crystallization. High glucose, more crystallization. You're not going to be able to go out and pick what your bees are going to get their sucrose from. So you're just going to deal with what they have. Spring honey is my wife's favorite, and the reason is it stays liquid longer. The other thing that you have control over, if you're collecting the end of the year, is the temperature that you store it at. So the temperature that you store it at might surprise you. Colder storage doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to not crystallize quicker, because colder storage, when we're talking about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, for example, would accelerate crystallization. Isn't that backwards? But if you kept it, here's a sweet spot, because that was part of the question here, between 55 and 60 degrees Fahrenheit is a good storage temperature. It can reduce the crystallization. If you kept it at 65 or 70, you just accelerated crystallization, which doesn't make sense, because people think, well, at a warmer temp, would not it then stay liquid longer? You're trying to keep these particles from interacting with each other and performing a platform or shaping a platform that your crystallization happens on. So you could go to the freezer. I bring this up time and time again, but your backyard beekeepers maybe have the freezer space. Most beekeepers would not. If you've got 100 pounds or 10 gallons or 15 gallons of honey, you probably don't have the freezer space. But if you do have a nice horizontal freezer that you could put them in, because you may have bought it just for honey storage, that locks it in and it's not going to crystallize. Then you just break it out a couple days before you're going to sell it, use it, give it away, whatever you're going to do. So that kind of arrests it there. So I'm giving you layers. I like raw honey, 200 microns or larger, and I don't mind that it crystallizes. So that's the other end of it. Who cares if it crystallizes? Now, in buckets and bigger containers, that's a challenge. But in the smaller jars, who cares? Let it crystallize. Let it set. And then warm it up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit and let it all reliquefy if that's what you want. But here's the thing. We have lots of friends that want the crystallized honey. And one of the things about that is, for some people, it's validation that's real honey. If you have honey that doesn't crystallize at all, is very thick and very dense and things like that, we have to be concerned that maybe it was overheated. Some people fall for that. Really cook your honey and then it will never crystallize. So I'm kind of not on that side of the fence when it comes to taking care of honey, and there could be something to it, getting it hotter than it needs to be, but then you just end up with a sweetener. All the good stuff is gone. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't taste as good as it otherwise would. Freezing it is the ultimate. And by the way, when you put it in the freezer, I don't mean that you're freezing the honey, because honey has a much lower freezing temperature than what is obtained inside a freezer. So what you get is a great preservation of all the flavors, all the scents, and everything else. So it is, if you're looking for a way to store your honey and you don't have a lot of it, right to the freezer right after extraction. So that's what I would recommend. But yeah, it does not all crystallize the same. And these are very loose at 55 to 60 degree Fahrenheit. If you've got the kind of honey that we have coming in right now today, that stuff is going to crystallize no matter what we do. So you're left with ultrafiltration or freezing or overheating it, which I don't recommend. Okay, that was it for 2 and 2 alpha. Moving on to question number 3, which comes from, the first name just says Sean's City, South Dakota. Fred, I know sometimes you do shout outs. I do. I haven't done one in a long time. And to other YouTube channels. And here's one I came across that you might like for that purpose. he doesn't have a bunch of subscribers. Now, normally, and there are people that reach out to me and say, hey, this needs a shout out, this needs a shout out. Usually if it's coming from the person that owns the channel, hey, give me a shout out on my channel because I need views. I tend to shy away from that, but when it's somebody else, Sean's from South Dakota, saying give me the shout out, I gave it a look-see. You should know I spend hours every day looking at emails and responding to all those I can. So I did. I looked at this and I liked what I saw. That's why we're doing the shout out right now. Let me just give you the channel name. The YouTube channel name is technically Beekeeping. And the title of this particular video is I redesigned my DIY jar feeder and got 100 times the results. So what was really interesting here is technically Beekeeping, the YouTube channel. He goes through a very lengthy process of evaluating, in this case, quart feeder jars that people have historically put on top of their inner covers with the little cutouts for the lid so that you could feed your bees with an upside down jar through a lid that has holes in it. And you may know, if you've been listening to me for a long time, I do not use that method of feeding my bees. And before we get into what's going on here, I don't use it because the jars that are inverted, the canning jars, whatever you want to use, that have little holes in them, as long as the bees are consuming them and keeping up with that, that is great. But here's what happens. They get half full, a third, down to a third full, and we get a cold night. We get the following warm up, and what happens is that airspace in that jar expands and expresses the syrup right down into the beehive, whether the bees need it or want it or not. So there's some things that I look for. Number one, I don't like that the feeder hole is dead center on that inner cover. And the reason I don't like it is if it expresses its liquid down, where is it going? Straight down, ultimately right onto the brood. And it doesn't take a lot of sugar syrup to drown larvae. So it can overwhelm your bees. But here's some of the things that I like that I noticed right away. In his test board, the feeder holes are actually around the periphery, not through the center. They access through the center and they go. Long story short, I want you to look at the video. Give me your thoughts on that. Leave comments. Tell him that I sent you there. Because here's what he's looking for, by the way. Testers. He's looking for people to participate in evaluating what he's come up with, which is a method of putting a sponge on the lid. So he goes through all these different holes and all these different surface textures and stuff because some of the metal lids and things the bees upside down were falling off of, having a difficult time collecting on so they could get the nectar. And the sponge system seemed to work for a lot of reasons. Watch the video. Let me know what you think. The title of the video again is I redesigned my DIY jar feeder, got 100 times the results. The channel is technically Beekeeping. Okay. So that's it. That's a good one. Check it out. See if you become a part of his test group. And then maybe get yourself some lids with sponges on them and see how that goes, see how it feeds. I would also, I guess an afterthought here, I would like to take the lid design that he's come up with a sponge on it, see if it puts enough resistance on that lid to where if you left it unattended upside down under normal temperatures that a beehive would be exposed to, and see once it's half full, once there's a airspace in it, see if it empties itself without the bees. Find out. That's kind of the test that I would do. This is why I like the Bee Buffet, for example, because it doesn't express down in. And it's also why I like the Rapid Round and some of the other feeders because they don't empty themselves into the hive even without the bees trying to draw it off. Question number 4 comes from Lauren from Cheshire, Connecticut. I'm new to backyard beekeeping this year. I have Italian bees, which were overwintered and treated for mites already this year before I got them. I ordered Formic Pro to treat for the first time. I plan on checking for mites using a little cup with a lid and a strainer. Maybe that's something like this. Cup for bees, strainer goes into this, lid, so you can shake it. This one comes from Stiracell. It's the best one I know of. Anyway, Doing all of this, and then after checking for the mites, doing a treatment. Any advice for myself using Formic Pro as a first-time beekeeper? I have a Langstroth hive, 2 boxes now. As with any, because I want the advice that I give you here to be timeless. If doses change and if temperature parameters and things like that change down the road, I want you to look at the information that comes with the Formic Pro that you purchase, because they could be coming out with a new method. There was Formic first, then there's Formic Pro. There could be another iteration down the line. Always look at what they're recommending, because they give you temperature parameters. In other words, the environment. What are the temperatures going to be during your period of treatment? Whether you should use 1 packet or 2. So Dr. Robin Underwood gave a great presentation about this, and she uses the 2 packs at once, but when you do that, it's shocking for some new beekeepers. Now here's the thing. You don't want to breathe that stuff, and you want to put some gloves on your hands, and here's why. It is aromatic. It is very volatile when you first open the packs and put them out. It smells very strong, and for some people, when they see their bees trying to pile out of the hive, they get very upset about it. Okay. If the temperatures are really hot and you don't follow all the parameters recommended in the write-up there, one of those being that you have to have open entrances, your hive needs to be fully vented during this treatment. Some people automatically assume their queen is going to be damaged, and they replace their queen in concert with giving this treatment, right? Now, there are other people that say that they do it, they follow the instructions, and their queen does just fine. Other people have put their queen in a queen cage and moved her to a safe location, kind of like banking a queen for the period of the treatment. Now, if you're doing the double treatment right now, I believe that's a 10-day treatment. So you're in and out in 10 days, your packets are gone. Don't leave them there. Follow those established guidelines. So if they say it's a 10-day treatment or an 11-day treatment or wherever they say it is, on that 11th day, you remove it. Don't just leave it assuming that, well, you just get a little trickle down and then get it whenever you get to it. So you have to be actively engaged in the treatment and following the parameters as closely as you possibly can. You also need to remove supers to get it down onto the brood frames. It is approved in most states, but you have to check with your own state too. Not every state has the same approvals for treatments. It is considered an organic treatment, and it has always been my number 2 go-to if I didn't get the results I needed out of oxalic acid vaporization. The other thing is it has shelf life. Don't buy more than you're going to use, because I believe it's good for a couple of years, and after that, you've got an unusable product that you're just going to be throwing away. So there's an expense there. So my advice is follow all guidelines that come with it, personal protective equipment, follow the venting and configurations, watch your forecast, make sure that the temperatures outside are going to be within range of the treatment. So that's it. If it's too hot, you kill a bunch of bees. We had people in my bee club use it in the past, piles of dead bees in front of their hives. It was very dramatic, but then we realized, trying to troubleshoot that the temperatures were way high during that period. So there's a lot going on. The other thing is the mite check is really important. Check your mites, count them. Make sure that treatment is required. Because if they have a very low mite number, if you're getting 1 or 2 mites out of 300 bees counted, this time of year, particularly too, because as the drones start thinning down, by the way, you can expect to see higher numbers of varroa mites on your actual nurse bees. So check for mites before and after, always good, because you want to know what the efficacy was. If you have an insertable tray, if you've got a mite sticky board that some people have, they've got screen bottoms with sticky boards underneath. The Bee Smart Designs tray, for example, the bottom board, there's a tray that goes underneath. After treatment, you should see a bunch of dead mites laying down there. If you do a treatment and there's only 1 or 2 dead mites at the end of it, that was not a very mite-loaded colony. I have people that like to send me pictures of their mite count on their bottom boards, and there will be hundreds of dead mice on the bottoms of their hives when they remove the tray or the board. And that would really alarm me where I am. I have never had mite loads like that. Many years ago, I might have, but with the bee stock that I'm currently using and the mild treatments that I'm doing, I more than have the mite loads under control, but I don't bring in unknown stock to my apiary either. So this is, I've cautioned people and tried to get people to get their mites under control before now, because they're making those fat-bodied winter bees coming very soon. The health of the bees that make those bees is very important. Those are the nurse bees that are going to be providing the nourishment to the developing larvae, right? So, and then those larvae become those winter fat-bodied nurse bees that are going to carry your colony for 6 months, 5 months, whatever it happens to be. But always, always make sure, first of all, that it's necessary to treat mite counts, and that when you do treat, follow the guidelines of the company that's providing that nod, whoever it happens to be. Make sure that you're complying with everything and that what you're using is approved by your state. So, Department of Agriculture. So moving on, question number 5. This comes from Merlin Twiggles. Fred, I've been thinking about that green foundation for drones. I thought I had one of those here. I do. It says, I want to cut some down and throw it in my super. My theory is less wax, more honey. What do you think? So here's the thing. This is drone foundation. This is a drone frame, in fact. This one comes from Acorn. So it's heavy waxed. And some people don't use it. It was one of the first things that came out when people wanted to get their varroa mites under control. You let them draw the comb out here, and then of course the queen laid eggs, and when she lays eggs in large cells, she lays drone eggs. So then the drones would get in their capped phase here, and then you would remove this frame, and therefore you're removing not only your drones that are in the pupa state, but you're getting all of those varroa destructor mites that are trying to reproduce in the drone cells. Now, colonies that have a lot of drone comb, and you'll see a mix sometimes. Half a frame will have worker cells, and then you'll see the drone cells, but you'll see that they're full of honey, right? So it's not a single-use cell for your bees. So if you had a frame of all drawn comb that's green like this, and they're not building drones, they may be using it for storage for honey also. So to the question from Merlin Twiggles, would this result in less beeswax being used, bigger cells, more capacity for honey, with less work for the bees? And I say, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. The smaller worker cells, there would be more cells on the field, and therefore more cell walls, and therefore more work involved in consuming honey to make those cell walls, and so drone comb would be good storage for your bees. If you can get them not to use it for drones, sure. So I say, yeah, that would work. And try it out. And I hope you'll share whether or not that worked, how the bees were. When you look at the flow frames, they are not quite as large as drone cells, but they are also not as small as worker cells. The key, and a lot of thought went into creating cells that were too large for workers so that your queen would not lay eggs in it. But since they use queen excluders, that doesn't matter. But not so large that a worker would lay an egg if you had laying workers, for example, in the absence of a queen. You wouldn't have a worker laying egg to produce drones. But laying workers lay their eggs in worker-sized cells in every cell they find. Laying workers are just like that. So those are a little larger and deeper. So the other thing is, if we're really just trying to get more honey out of a frame, without the bees doing more work and building more cells than they need to, why not have them extend? I think this is the thinking behind why some people do 9 frames in a honey super that's designed for 10 frames. That they start off with all the frames very close together. As they draw out the comb, now you'll see frame spacers. I had some around here that I don't see right now, but they use frame spacers so that they're equidistant and you get 9 frames instead of 10, and then you have deeper cells, more honey, and then of course when you're uncapping and everything, you're not interacting with the frame itself because they've extended their honey beyond the frame. I don't do that. One of the reasons I don't do it is the bees tended to create these irregular, this is the face of the honeycomb on one, this is the face of the honeycomb on another. And then when you lift your frames up, if you don't pull them to the side first, they scrape into each other. The other thing is you always have to keep your frames then, if they're deeper cells like that, you have to keep your frames in the exact same order, put them back exactly the same, and so on. So none of this juxtaposing of frames around. To get like the ones that are on the ends, which are usually only half done, moving those to the middle, and then taking the middle frames that are fully capped and put them to the outskirts, and so on, trying to get your bees to work every frame, all sides. So I think that could work, but I think before I did that, personally, I might shift to, if that's my goal, I might shift to just 9 frames, spread a little further apart, and then let them draw out deeper comb. What do you think? Sounds good to me. Question number 6 comes from Mike. Mike is in Fall Creek, Wisconsin. This is my first year with a Layens hive. The bees have been doing very well. They quickly built out several frames with foundation and several with no foundation at all. Recently, we've had a couple of very hot temps in the hundreds and high humidity. So my Layens hive is insulated with no ventilation and in the direct sun. I checked today and found a pile of dead bees in the open space of the hive. The pile was approximately 3 inches deep by 4 inches wide. I don't know, does that mean a deep pile of dead bees? During one of the hot spells, a big storm rolled in as the bees were bearded outside, wondering if they had all retreated inside and subsequently died because of the heat and humidity, or do I have something else to worry about? Also found some collapsed comb, no foundation, so that's foundationless comb, and that's it. So with the Layens hives, now this year where I live, northeastern United States, state of Pennsylvania, we never hit 100 degrees. So I don't have these temperature issues. I will mention that the Layens hives that I have, they are the ones that came from Dr. Leo Sharashkin. And they came without any insulation on top. You're supposed to do that yourself. So they have vents on the ends at the top, and they have the lamb's wool insulation or sheep's wool around the circumference. Wool that otherwise would be cast off that wasn't good enough to be used for woolen mills and things like that. So when I looked at that and saw that it had a metal clad roof with a very thin piece of plywood under it, and then this airspace, and then of course the backs of your frames, which are right where your bees are. There's no cover board, there's no inner cover. The frames themselves they compose the cover board inside the hive. So I recognized right away that for me personally, I want to have insulation in there, because these metal-clad roofs, even where I live, they hit 130 degrees plus Fahrenheit. Wicked hot, as they would say in Vermont. So with them getting that hot, I needed to put some kind of insulation in there. So for some, I put in polystyrene, the 2-inch foam core. And now I use double bubble, of course. I don't want that heat transmitting to the bees. Now, I'm not saying that that's what caused the death of these bees. And there's another horizontal hive company that builds Layens that I want you to look into, Bearsville Bees, Bearsville bees. They make really heavy-duty, well-insulated Layens hives. So check them out, Bearsville Bees. I'll try to remember to put a link down in there for them because that just came to mind. They do fantastic craftsmanship, and it's much heavier duty. The hives that I got from Dr. Leo are all plywood. Sides, bottoms, they're just sandwiched. And then, of course, that insulation inside. And some of the plywood that I got bubbled out a little bit, even though it's all painted. Bearsville Bees, those guys, it's all solid wood, all really well constructed. So just check them out, see what's going on. And I have no allegiance to either group over the other. I'm just saying that there are options that seem a little better. When I saw their craftsmanship at the North American Honeybee Expo and interviewed them, I was very impressed. And if it didn't cost $1 million to ship them, that's just a figure of speech. very expensive to ship. So you would have to be in their area. I think that's where Dr. Leo, the shipping, it's a big volume thing. It's a full-size lens because I bought his biggest one. I have 2 of his. If it was all wood, heavy dimensional lumber, it would of course be very heavy to ship, and that's why it costs so much. But look at the way those are made, and that's a really good company. So if you're going to any kind of expo or bee gathering where they're going to be, it would be worth reaching out and maybe bringing one of those home. So if you like the Layens hives, those are really good. And my suspicion here with this is, because my hives, although I don't, we're not in the hundreds, so I can't make a head-to-head comparison, but insulating the hive cover goes a long way to your bees being able to control what's going on inside the hive and keeping it cool. My Layens hives have done extremely well, basically on their own. They just do fantastic. So that's my advice there. If you have piles of dead bees, I would be really looking into brood issues and making sure that you do a thorough inspection of that hive to find out if there's some secondary cause there, because that does not sound right to me. You can, unless right off the bat, oh man, I don't have any insulation on the cover of the hive. I just have the lid that closes and that's it. There's no insulating material between that and the frames of the bees. That would be my number one thing. If you did not insulate that, that's a problem. If you have insulated it, now you go to the next step. Let's find out what's wrong with these bees. So if you send bees off for testing, you need more than 100 samples. I think they ask you to put it in 70% isopropanol, and you can send them off for testing to see if something else is wrong. The other thing is you want to look at brood disease potential. Look at the brood areas. Look at the brood frames. Do you have like chewed brood? Do you have greasy looking sunken caps and things like that? Is there any chance that you might be looking at some other issue? But these are the adults that died. So if you have foul brood, that impacts brood. But you would see like secondary problems like deformed wing virus and things like that. So look at the dead bees too. Look at their physical condition. Are there examples of the wings being shriveled up or almost non-existent? Is there other evidence that there's some other kind of issue going on with the hive? Some of you may have troubles diagnosing your hives, and that's why I'm going to recommend honeybees and their maladies. I've mentioned this before. This is not for profit. This is the extension.psu.edu. So that's Pennsylvania State University Extension Office publishes this. Honeybees and their maladies are a frequent thing that I reference when you want to show people what they're looking for with brood disease and things like that. It's pocket size. It's really good. This is a revised edition. You can just Google that and get one. I highly recommend that you be informed regarding how to diagnose bee problems. The other thing is dead bees don't tell us a lot. If they were still alive, if some of them were still walking around, you can also observe their behavior. Do they tremble a lot? Do they seem disoriented? Are there secondary issues that tell us that this is not just heat, right? Very unusual to have bees get overheated and die in piles like that, even with a storm that comes through, unless they flooded. But with the Layens hive, the other thing is all my hives are well off the ground. So that's something I think about too with the people that are dealing with all the water and all the rain that's going around the country in a lot of places. I would definitely have steel posts driven in the ground, and I would have all of my hives elevated off the ground, and hopefully you're not in a floodplain, that kind of thing. But I think about that. I've elevated all my hives because of skunks, but that definitely also benefits me when it comes to if water were to rush through. Several inches of water would not impact any of my beehives. So there are a lot of things to think about. And if I were in some kind of floodplain, I would make sure that I drove some heavy-duty T-posts in. I've posted videos on how to make, with electrical conduit, metal conduit, how to make hive stands that adjust to any terrain. So you can drive those in and use soil friction or soil compaction to support your hive stand. And a lot of those have been out there for 17, 18 years without moving. They work really well. So that's the last question. Oh, here we go. Here's question number 7. Here, I thought I was done. This comes from Dustin from Belverde, Texas. I like this question because it's funny. Says, good afternoon, Fred. I made it to all of your presentations last year at the North American Honeybee Expo. So for those of you who are wondering, do I have any schedule that I've posted of where I will be giving presentations? I'll just give you some quick ones right now. I will be at the January North American Honeybee Expo in Louisville, Kentucky. I will also be a keynote speaker at the Pennsylvania State Beekeepers Association. I will also be a keynote speaker at the Texas Beekeepers Association, Austin, Texas. And so it says here, and I'm looking forward to the above average presentation. That is my target zone to give you something above average. And Dustin's going to be at all these, so I hope he says hello. Anywhere. The real purpose of me sending this message is my wife really wanted me to purchase a coffee mug with a priceless artwork that Picasso, I mean your wife, left on the fridge to remind you to feed your chickens. Okay, so long story short, and the original artwork is not handy. It's locked away in a vault. Incredibly valuable. It's an illustration that's incredibly realistic. You'll think you're looking at an actual chicken, but it is just a drawing. So for Dustin and others, and I did appreciate that at the North American Honeybee Expo, some people had her chicken rendering on their shirts. So it's almost an inside joke. My wife did a sketch on a little sticky, put it on the microwave so I would see it. It says, don't forget the chickens. And she actually illustrated a chicken, which I was very impressed by. So we turned it into t-shirts. And I'm surprised that I did not put up coffee mugs. So anyway, now at Fred's Fine Products, it's called on Teespring, Fred's Fine Products. And I'll put a link down in the video description also. I've added the coffee cup, and you'll see right away the very distinctive, I think it's a rooster, not sure. But you'll see what we're talking about. And so those coffee cups are now available. And so for Dustin, tell your wife thank you for appreciating that. And that's it. So that's out there. Now we're in the fluff section. So Friday the 13th. I don't have to tell you, robbing pressure is rising here in the northeastern United States. Resources will start to dwindle. The colonies are maxing out their size, which means they have a lot of extra foragers out there, which means they're inspecting every little nook and cranny looking for something to bring back to their hive. So this also means that any colonies that are in a weaker state, any colonies of bees that have a lot of resources in there, but they don't have the bee power to defend it, we need to help them defend it by reducing their entrances now. So what size entrance? Let me get specific. My year-round entrance size now is 3/8 of an inch high because that prevents shrews, mice, everything from getting in because temperatures are going to be getting cooler and these weakened colonies will also be targets for rodents to move into at night when the temperatures drop. So 3/8 inch, we'll keep those out. 3/8 of an inch by 3 to 4 inches in width would be enough for them to defend it. If you've got wide open entrances because of the nectar flow or something like that, it's time to get out there and start narrowing those down. Prevention in this case is worth a pound to cure. As always, if you get honeybees, forget the wasps. They're not yet the dangerous ones out there. Right now, the danger is from other honeybees. And once they get in, once they get resources, they're going to be all over the place. They're just like criminals. They're trying to get in your back door. They're checking all the little nooks and crannies. I was using the new Sericel Beast Buster bottom board, which has a little wasp trap built into the bottom in the back. I took that out because it was actually collecting a lot of bees, and the thinking, of course, is, well, the only bees that would be going in back there under that Beast Buster bottom board would be bees looking to rob other bees. So I didn't really want to trap and kill a bunch of those. So I've pulled the trays out. I might put it back later when the culprits become wasps, but for right now, I'm not interested in trapping even the robber honeybees, because if they find a colony there's a reason why they're going to the sides and the bottom and the back. They don't want to go through the entrance because there are some guard bees there, so they're trying to backdoor them. So keep your entrances narrow enough and size it to the colony that you have. And look at the number of guard bees that are on the landing board, because there are going to be issues really quick. That's it. Swarm alerts. As you saw in the opening sequence, they had a swarm yesterday. I collected them. I've got them. I'm going to combine them with another colony of bees. So a weaker colony. But just be aware, it's not too late for swarms around here, northeastern United States. Anyway, harvest for me, next week. That's my last honey harvest for the year. That's it. After that, everything that they're going to be building for the end of September and into October, those are resources that are just going to fortify the colonies to get themselves through winter, hopefully without any feeding necessary. Of course, if you've hived a swarm or something like that, you're going to have to feed them because they are going to have a situation where there's a lot of attrition going on. The swarms that you hive now, if you're trying to put it out there by itself, they're not having replacements. So normally a colony this time of year is seeing 1,500 new worker bees every single day. And colonies like that, they've newly swarmed and you've hived them up, they're losing about 500 bees every single day. So if you don't have a nice big swarm going in there, if it's a little one, then it's a game of attrition. They're just going to be losing bees as they go. And I have a lot of thoughts on that, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. But anyway, so I'm harvesting honey next week. That'll be it. After that, we're starting to look at packing down. Next week, coming up Tuesday, I have an interview coming up with the author of that book right there, Hillary Kearney. So we're going to talk to her. I did interview her before this book came out, but now that the book is published, it's available on Amazon, probably other places too. It's called The Heart of the Hive by Hillary Kearney. It's a really good book. And we're going to talk to her because there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. First of all, she did the Audible version of that. She narrated her own book. And they made her try out for that. So I have questions for Hillary. We're going to find out exactly what that process was like and how she got through it. Yellow Jacket update. Some people, you talk about an unpopular video. Show a video about yellow jackets in your yard sometime and see how many beekeepers are interested in learning about it. You would think beekeepers of all people would want to understand the biology of yellow jackets and hornets and other things that may have an impact on your bees as well as the environment that your bees are getting the resources from. But people don't seem to care. I care. That's why I'm going to be showing you that my yellow jacket nest actually inside the suet cage is doing really well, and I think they're doing what I thought they would do, which means, well, you just have to watch. I'm going to leave you with a cliffhanger there. For those of you, the three of you out there who care about the yellow jacket wasp, I'm going to get you up close and personal. We're going to do a recap. Check them out if you haven't seen them already. Let's see what else. There's a beekeeping breakfast coming up this Wednesday. This is for members of my bee club that might be watching. Don't forget, Wednesday morning, 9 to 11, beekeeping breakfast. And I'll give, what else? Water, I say here. Make sure, with the heat, people that are in areas that are super hot, I know this doesn't make any sense to the people that are being rained on right now. We have a huge storm system working its way up through the south. But keep lots of water available for your bees in the same spot over and over. Bees pick a favorite water spot. The water bees go out to that spot. They check it over and over. Dr. Seeley and his students studied water bees and found that they search the same little 4-inch space. The same bees come back to that exact spot. So if they find the water's gone, then they don't do such a good job of keeping your hive the humidity where it needs to be, high or low. They can fan it away to cool it down. They also spread water all over the surface of your brood, and they fan their wings to keep that nice and cool through evaporation. Water is in demand year-round with your beehives. So make sure you have plenty of fresh water, a good source for them. I don't want to say what I'm trying to do because if it fails, I'll just have people asking about it, and then I have to constantly say that it fails because I'm trying to make my own. I have a water wall, which is just a bunch of cinder blocks stacked up, and I have a fog nozzle that fogs water on it until it gets all wet and drippy, and I want to have, what do I need? I need moss all over it. But then I was watching these YouTube, I'm sure you've heard of it. I watched a YouTube video about how to make my own, in this case, they were making their own concrete boulders, so they were look-alike boulders, but I got some ideas. why don't I use this concrete mix, this lightweight mix, and make my own water features for my bees to feed at, because you can mess with the concrete. Anyway, of course there will be a video about that. And I'm going to make my own drinkers and stuff. So it won't just be the cinder blocks now. I want to have this little cascading series of pools. And I don't need to tell you more because I want you to obviously watch the video. So that's it. If you have questions, please submit them in through the website, thewaytobee.org. Go to the page, mark the way to bee, fill out the form. And you can, of course, comment under videos. That's potluck. I do my very best to respond to each and every single comment on each and every video because I don't want to miss something. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend ahead and that everything is going well for you and your bees. Thanks so much for being here and watching.